Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And what I want to talk about in this video are some of the best races in the game to play on Legendary difficulty, the new Legendary difficulty, with very significant AI cheats that are available. AI cheats that result in AI just building a lot of very powerful armies, using heroes, high-ranking lords, all of that kind of stuff. Like, look at this situation. It's turn 30. And we have a rank 15 lord over here against a rank 13 lord. And then we have 12, rank 12, and Forgrim, who's level 20. That is something that would not really happen before. If you want to go even further, like we could possibly look at some of the stuff that's available in Cafe, where we can see that Cafe is recruiting a bunch of units. Though, keep in mind that Xiaoming has not necessarily done exceptionally well in this particular campaign. So what the AI is doing is it's recruiting a lot of armies, it's recruiting higher tier units, and there are certain races that are much better at dealing with this than others. And those races are currently the best races, or the best suited, if you will, to handle the new meta. Now, an honorable mention would be the Chaos Dwarfs. I don't think they could quite make the cut. They're a very powerful race, but they also have a lot of inherent weaknesses that don't necessarily mesh very well with the current meta. See, Chaos Dwarfs can get a lot of powerful units if you build up a powerful economy, but that takes some doing, and you are extremely vulnerable in that process. Now, this would be fine if Chaos Dwarf campaigns weren't taking place in areas where things can go sideways very, very quickly, like Zaytan has Grimgor in his backside, Drazov has Emmerich, Tretch, Gorst, Kugaf, Greases near him, and then Grimgor. In this campaign, I lucked out in the sense that no one was able to attack me. By the time I dealt with Kugaf and Gorst, Gorst just, I didn't eliminate him completely, but I was not really serious necessarily about this campaign, but I lucked out in the sense that Grimgor ended up being weakened by Tamarkon. And also Tretch, interestingly enough. But that's a very, very lucky situation. Things could have gone so badly so quickly in this campaign. And that's the thing. Like, Astrogov is kind of in a safer position, but even then he still has to deal with a potential wrath of Grimgor. And if it's not Grimgor, it's all the factions that do hate you, which they do as the Chaos Dwarfs. And so you're in a vulnerable state where your economy takes time to build up, or getting these units takes time to build up. And really, even with the new AI changes, it's still the early game that is the most significant challenge of the campaign. It's much higher than it was before, but that's really to the detriment of the Chaos Dwarfs. Make no mistake, if you do manage it and you start pumping out armies that look like this, you will obliterate everything in your path. But it's getting to that point that's difficult. And really, at this point, the campaign is kind of won, because like the only threat that could have stopped me was Grimgor, and he's been, well, not neutralized, but Tamarkon is certainly putting the pressure on him. So, honorable mention, can be worth playing, but a lot of weaknesses because of limited armies, vulnerable economy. You can also consider the Wood Elves as an honorable mention, just because very limited recruitment slots, limited economy. Again, I mean, Wood Elves dealing with 5 stacks, I mean, that's just kind of the situation, really. Races and factions that can produce a lot of armies, like look at what Vlad has. Those are the kind of races that will do well. Like you see Vlad here. He's got 4 armies. Actually, it's 5. Sitting in Sylvania or near Sylvania, and then he's got another one in Stirland and another one marching on Karl Franz. We're talking here 7 freaking armies. And when you're dealing with 7 armies, it doesn't matter how powerful one of your armies can be, and keep in mind that while this army is powerful, it does have weaknesses, because hobgoblins don't necessarily scale well past, let's say, turn 20, and it's certainly not on any army that doesn't have Gorduz in it. But when you're dealing with 7 freaking armies in a faction, that becomes a problem real quick, very, very quickly in your campaign. So that's one of the reasons I'm not including the Wood Elves, why I'm not including the Chaos Dwarves, though I do think both of them are honorable mentions. You can also consider the High Elves as part of that, because, yeah, the days where High Elves could just obliterate everything in their path without breaking a sweat by just using Spearmen and Archers, I think those days have passed. You're now going to actually have to, the horror, recruit other units in your High Elven campaigns because it's just not going to be good enough. Because let me put it bluntly, once you're dealing with higher tier units, your archers and spearmen, well, let's just say their weaknesses do show very quickly. So which races do make the cut? Well, at number 5, it would have to be the Dark Elves from my perspective. See, unlike the Chaos Dwarfs, who do have a lot of power through instant construction and the labor power, but suffer because obviously they need different resources, the Dark Elves just get slaves and use them for instant construction or dictats in their provinces. So they can print out money, they can get growth, they can get control. You're never really going to struggle for either money, growth, or control in a Dark Elven campaign, especially if you're playing Morathi. They are an incredibly powerful race that thrives on early game aggression, and since early game aggression is far more important than it ever has been in Warhammer 3, well, you can add 1 + 1 together and understand the situation. Like, consider Morathi's campaign start over here. I start building a barracks, and I find my initial 2 battles, I auto-resolve them because, yeah, mods for AR, and now, if I have Malice Darkblade DLC, I can get 2 freaking heroes, so I'm running around already with 3 heroes in this campaign from the start, more or less. And this is not the exception. This is actually the rule. It gets even better once you do unlock Morathi's first sorceress skill. So then you get access to 2 mages. So yeah, Morathi's freaking crazy. This is the power of the Dark Elves. Instant construction, lots of money, the ability of just flat out generating more money than the vast majority of factions on the map, having good post-battle loot options to begin with, the ability of turning slaves into money, the ability of using those slaves for instant construction, having heroes, virtually all heroes except Assassins of Cain if you're playing Morathi, having all heroes available at tier 3, is a gigantic freaking power. And then 700 income for settlements, yeah, ridiculous. Being able to get Dark Shards with shields and Blackheart Corsairs, really powerful. The sole reason I think that I would not rank the Dark Elves higher on this list is because they do lack certain versatility in their unit roster that other races do have. For instance, their flying roster is more or less non-existent. Yeah, you do have Harpies, they're trash. You have Feral Manticores, they're trash. The only good unit, and an expensive one, are Black Dragons, and for all the benefits you have in growth and income, yeah, affording a good flying stack is going to be a problem. You also suffer in terms of lack of artillery. While your Blackheart Corsairs and Dark Shards will go a long way in a campaign, they do have weaknesses. They do have their problems. So you have a lot of heroes, you have a lot of armies, you have powerful artillery for those armies or army abilities for those Black Arcs, but you do have limitations. You have no global recruitment, and the Black Arcs need to be you need to be fighting near the coastline in order to make use of the Black Arcs. So those are certain issues. But overall, Dark Elves are in a very strong race, and you can steamroll even still despite the legendary AI buffs. In fact, those kind of buffs, like if it wasn't for the fact that Chaos Dwarfs need so many resources, so many turns to get off the ground running, they would actually be benefiting quite immensely from the changes to the AI, because more armies means more slaves, more post-battle loot, more laborers for Chaos Dwarfs. But it takes time to transition those laborers into materials, into armaments, all that, which is an issue that the Dark Elves don't have. At number 4, we have the Greenskins. If there is a race that thrives on post-battle loot and raiding, sacking, looting settlements, is the Greenskins. And part of the AI changes is that the AI is going to prioritize getting its provincial capitals to a higher level faster. It is fairly common to see a lot of provincial capitals at tier 4, like turn 40, turn 30 or so. It depends on the race you're dealing with. The AI has so many financial benefits, so many growth benefits that they will surpass you. But here's the thing. You can keep up with them because the Greenskins have one of the highest growth levels in the game. And on top of that, when the Greenskins take a settlement, there's a chance when you're occupying a settlement that you take it at the same tier. This is really powerful for a settlement like Zarnagrund. This is one of the reasons Grimgor is one of the most powerful legendary lords in the game, because he has a chance of taking Zarnagrund as a tier 5 settlement, not the tier 4 one. He doesn't have to spend the resources, the money, the resources. Imagine the power level that gives you in a campaign. But now that all AI factions, especially major ones, can get their settlements to a higher level, well, you end up in a situation as Grimoire, or any Greenskin, where you can get a bunch of tier 4, even tier 5 settlements relatively quickly in a campaign. The AI gets a lot of benefits, but they benefit you more. Post-battle loot means more armies. You get so much money from post-battle loot, from sacking, looting settlements. It is absurd. Your economy can be tens of thousands of gold in the red, and you might still only need to fight one single battle a turn to keep yourself going and even make a profit compared to where you were before. That is how absurd the Greenskins are. So yeah, they actually end up benefiting from the changes that were made to the AI. Now, their unit roster does have some holes that could use plugging, especially with regards to flying units, to be sure, though they certainly have helped them by adding orc boys with spears and goblins, regular goblins, as opposed to just goblin spearmen, though they actually changed the goblin spearmen so they have an anti-lurch benefit. But effectively, as the Greenskins, you have good monstrous units, you have good casters, you have a lot of heroes, you have things like stone trolls that are pretty solid. You even have decent enough artillery, though typically speaking, I don't really use it that much, because why would you? You have nasty skulkers and you have stone trolls available in your campaign. You have high amounts of replenishment, good levels of control, and an economy that is built on around the idea that you get a lot of these raiding stashes and you just get biblical levels of post-battle loot, which is only going to increase now that AI is going to get higher tier settlements faster in your campaign. The only real downside of the Greenskins is, like, yeah, some of our roster issues, in particular flying units, so you have enough range units to deal with any flyers and artillery. That's what the wall armies are for, right? It's like, oh, the enemy has artillery, cute. Let's send in the meat wagons, right? The meat waves against the enemy. That's how you deal with artillery, is the Greenskins. So lots of options, lots of versatility, lots of power and scalability on legendary difficulty. And number 3, it would be the Empire. The Empire will benefit significantly from fighting more armies, because in Karl Franz's campaign, in Elspeth's campaign, in Gelt's campaign, the only Imperial campaigns that are worth playing, I'm not counting Volkmar or Marcus Wolfhard in this, but in the Free Principle Empire campaigns, every time you fight a battle, you get some kind of resource. You need a mage for Gelt, you need gunpowder units for Elspeth, but since their focus is on mages or gunpowder units respectively, or with Karl you get prestige, then that means fighting a lot of these battles, while it won't net you as much money as, say, the Greenskins or Dark Elves, for instance, it will net you actual campaign power. Because with Karl, for instance, you get electro machinations. You may end up having more prestige than you can reasonably spend. That was certainly the case pre-Thrones of Decay. They kind of toned it down with the release of Thrones of Decay, because they gave Karl a bunch of things to spend prestige on, and then they gave us tons and tons of armies. Like, imagine fighting 7 stacks or 6 stacks of troops under Vlad in one turn. This was already something I encountered pre-patch playing a Gelt campaign. Well, post-patch, it is a certainty you'll fight that many armies at one point, or maybe over 2 turns. You'll have more prestige or arcane essays or schematics than you can reasonably spend it on. If you're playing Elspeth, you'll literally be pushing Nuln to get to tier 5 as quickly as possible so you can unlock everything, and then you'll be spamming Hellstorms, gunpowder units, land ships in her campaign, or spamming mages or Gelt, or using every diplomatic trick available in a Karl Franz campaign. That is a biblical level of power that the Empire has access to. But beyond that benefit with specific campaign resources for the Imperial campaigns that are worth playing as, you also have another consideration to give to the Empire that came with Thrones Decay. All of their heroes are available fairly early on in their campaigns, even mages, with the exception of like Altdorf, that's a different discussion. But heroes are available early on in a campaign. You can get a good amount of hero capacity. You have one of the most versatile unit rosters in the game. You don't have flying units, but you have plenty of ways to deal with anything that's coming against you. Your infantry might not be the strongest in the game, but they do their job well enough to hold the line. You have fast-moving, range cavalry, you have really good artillery and plenty of it now that they've lowered the restrictions, in particular on cannons, and you have freaking tanks, as well as some of the best cavalry in the game. Bretonnia does win on the cavalry department because they have really good flying cavalry, but on land, the Empire is more than a match for them. It's that versatility, that's that kind of power and the versatility that Empire has in their campaigns and their roster that makes them such an incredible race to play at the moment. And they will certainly benefit from the AI changes at 5.2. Yeah, this is the thing. Creative assembly making the AI stronger doesn't necessarily make campaigns harder. It just because it can just as easily make us as players stronger. It doesn't apply in every case, to be certain, with respect to it, but with races like the Empire, it's absolutely the situation. And number 2, it would of course be the Dwarves, the regular Dwarves. Because you see, like with the Empire, in every Dwarven campaign, fighting more armies means more post-battle loot. In this case, it means more oath gold, which is very useful because it allows you to craft infinite numbers of items. You can use it for research to get very powerful things available for the research tree, specifically construction guilds and Grand Throne Chamber. So all of that is really strong. You add in the new deeps mechanic, and yeah, dwarves are incredibly powerful. They already benefited from playing in an aggressive playstyle. Now they benefit even further from that particular aggressive playstyle because, again, oath gold is a pretty big freaking deal. But here's the catch with the dwarves. It's not just the benefit you get as a player when you're playing a dwarf campaign. It's also the benefit all other dwarven factions have when you're playing their campaigns. Like, for instance, you see these armies here? These were Thorgrim's armies, mostly. Like, I did some swapping around of units and recruited a couple of others, but dwarves in Warhammer 2 in particular were ridiculous as part of the Order Tide because they had some of the best auto-resolve, and they still do. Now they have good replenishment even in your hands, let alone the hands of the AI. And with all of the growth benefits that they've been given, well, you end up in ridiculous situations in terms of growing their settlements very, very damn quickly. So that ends up being a biblical level of power on the hands of the dwarves. And on top of that, more so than other things, there's also the added benefit that in a dwarven campaign, you can guarantee confederation with all the other major dwarf factions. And minor factions, they're just going to line up for you to confederate. That's not really going to be a limiting factor on you at all. In fact, you will probably want to not confederate some of these factions as quickly as possible because you might benefit from them spending the money and their growth points on getting their settlements to a higher level. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm at turn 50. I'm making a ridiculous sum of money, right? Like, I'm getting closer and closer to 100k per turn income. Now, granted, I'm losing quite a lot of that money because of the armies I have, but geez, this map is really blue. That's all I can say. And then, oh yes, then, the real kicker is not just the guaranteed confederation, which for the Empire is only available for Karl Franz. It's also the fact that dwarves have one particular army setup that genuinely cannot be countered by a lot of enemy factions. Even factions that do have a way of countering it will struggle to do so. And of course, we're talking about gyrocopters. Brimstone guns, regular gyrocopters, it doesn't matter. Like, for instance, consider this situation in this campaign. Wulfric sent 4 full freaking stacks against me. And he couldn't do anything because Norskins don't have a good anti-air unit. The anti-air unit that they have, the javelin throwers, the hunters, they're no match for gyrocopters. And then everything else is like, yeah, they just get steamrolled. Then you consider gyro bombers with their plentiful amount of bombs and very high damage that you can get on them, even if you're not playing Malachi, and huge amount of bombs. Combine that with really great infantry, really great artillery, easy hero access, things like Like, seriously, things like Iron Drakes and Thunderers being a tier 2 unit from a dedicated building you can get from a tier 2 settlement is ridiculously strong. Iron Drakes and Thunderers can melt many early game armies, and then you have plenty of late game options available for you. Like, early game, I'd probably start with Iron Drake and Thunderers, or just rush for Gyrocopters. That is also a viable strategy. Certainly, Legend of Total War has used it to great effect in his own campaigns. That is where the strength of the Dwarves comes in 5.2. So what could be better than that? Well, I think you all know where this is going to go. Finally, at number 1, it is the Warriors of Chaos. Because of course it would be. Warriors of Chaos, ever since their rework at the launch of Immortal Empires, were so broken, and still are so broken, that they really trivialize any campaign that you play as them. It doesn't matter which Legendary Lord you pick, all of them are very, very strong. I'd probably not recommend Village, for instance, or Azazel, but all of them can get the job done very effectively. And here's the thing. There are 2 limiting factors for Warriors of Chaos. One, they can only have so many armies, not because of financial considerations, though that can play a role, at least very early on in a campaign, but hey, more armies to deal with, more post-battle loot, more money, no problem. But limited armies, and then limitation because of souls. Because souls are so important for the Gifts of Chaos. There's also the research limitation, but you overcome that, right? Especially if you fight a bunch of battles and get a bunch of students one turn once you finish research, because they did nerf students very significantly. But because you are fighting so many more battles due to the AI changes, you'll get so many more souls. And the benefit of souls is not just the fact that you get these benefits, it's also the fact that you get units, and you can swap these around every turn. Swap, get the Hell Cannon one turn, and then, get the Dragon Ogre Shagoff the next one. Continuously doing this if you have enough souls in order to achieve it. This works especially well as Archaon, but it doesn't matter who you're playing. I'd probably say Be'lakor may have become better than Archaon, because Bellacor's main weakness was the fact that he didn't have the souls benefit that Archaon has. But now that you might fight a lot more battles, maybe that's not so much of an issue anymore for Be'lakor at the very least. So lots of flexibility from that particular perspective. But then I've mentioned how continuously, I've mentioned throughout this video how everyone benefits from fighting more armies. You gain more power. Well, Warriors of Chaos are really good at fighting a lot of armies. They have one of the best armies in Auto-Resolve, especially like Warriors of Chaos and Chosen. But on top of that, they literally take those very powerful AI factions and subjugate them. Make them their vassals. Make the AI work for you. So all that power, all that strength, you can take it and make it work in your favor. That is something very few races can do in the game. And you can do regular vassalization. You don't just have to like subjugate someone. You can do regular vassalization through diplomacy. That gives you an extraordinary level of power. You turn Order factions against them, High Elves, Kislev, Empire, you turn them against each other, you conquer the world. Like, once you get a couple of powerful vassals, you can just AFK and let them win the campaign for you, more or less. Just point at a target and win. Or if you vassalize Grimgor for diplomacy, just point him at the entire world and he'll probably win. I think vassals are not quite as powerful as, proper factions that are standing on their own, but they still are strong enough, especially if you give them direction. And you get so powerful that no one will even declare war on you. That's not something you can say as the Dwarves or Empire or any of the other races that I've mentioned on this list. It's because the vassals do count as your own faction strength, so the AI is not going to be so willing to mess with you. And even if they do, they're going to be drowned in dozens and dozens of stacks at one point. It's completely game-breaking, and maybe it should give an indication that CA may not have chosen the best way of making the AI stronger. I mean, they succeeded, but I think they could refine it a bit further. But that's my list. Let me know what you guys think, which other races you'd put on this list. I mean, we could talk about Khorne, Slaanesh potentially, though only if you enjoy fighting a lot of grindy battles every single turn, because that's Slaaneshi campaigns in a nutshell. Khorne, Skaven. I was tempted to add Skaven, but there are some limitations over there with Skaven that other races don't have. That's all I had to say. Costin, signing out.